Someone You Should Know. A program about people you know, and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sachs, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sachs.
Well, I welcome you to another edition of Someone You Should Know. We are going to give you a lot of information today that's going to I hope it will open your eyes on this program because the discussion is going to be very, very interesting. We are brought to you today by our good friends over at No Sweat Experts. Roy Cook and his gang, they've been doing this for 20 years, folks, so they know what they're doing. As the weather starts to change now, make sure your heating and air conditioning system is functioning the way it's supposed to be functioning now in December as we head into the winter months and everything. Reach out to No Sweat Experts here in the DFW area. They know what they're doing. Also, thank you again, as always, to Christine Dean, who is the producer of this program, and also the DFW Networking Diva. You can look that up and check her out also. She's got a lot of neat stuff too. A friend of a friend is my guest today. I welcome Emily Francona to the show. Emily, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be with me.
Well, I'm just delighted to be here, and I have to thank our friend Bill to make the recommendation and have you work me in. Thank you.
Bill Greil, who was a childhood friend of mine back in the day, and he is now out in Oregon. He's a very, very high profile Rotarian and that's really kind of where our connection is. Bill writes to me occasionally and he says, "Boy, have I got a couple for you." And we're going to be talking with Emily Francona today, and we hope to be talking to her husband, Rick Francona, on one of our future podcasts and all. But Emily, you've had a terrific life so far. You've been involved in so many really great things, and I asked you to send me some bullet points, some things to talk about. And she sent me a list and all, folks. As I wrote back to her, I said, we could probably do a 6-part series or something on all the notes that you sent. But one of the real key things is I was fascinated that you are involved in a project in Guatemala called Adopt a Village. It is just amazing to me what it's all about. So I'm going to The springboard right from the beginning of the show is I want you to share with our viewers and listeners and all exactly what is the Adopt a Village in Guatemala program all about.
Well, thank you, Stuart, for that introduction. Adopt a Village in Guatemala is a project that's been going on for 30 years. And it is the project of a nonprofit organization that is registered in Oregon. And it is the vision and life dream of its founder, Frances Dixon, who traveled to Guatemala in the early 90s, just after that horrible civil war there. And she looked around, poked around, went to all the non-tourist areas to kind of see what was going on there, being a very curious person. And she discovered all kinds of horrendous atrocities, poverty, malnutrition, just horrible conditions in the more remote parts of Guatemala. And what particularly tugged on her heartstrings is she noticed that the indigenous population there had suffered by far the most. As your audience probably knows, most of Guatemala's indigenous population are the Maya, an ancient civilization that was flourishing thousands of years ago, but is currently making up about 40% or so of Guatemala's population. And they were the worst affected by that civil war. They were massacred, killed, tortured, displaced from their traditional villages. And what Frances found is that they wanted nothing more than education for their children. When she would ask parents, if you could have anything for your children, what would you want? Clothes, nice houses, better food, what? All wanted education for their children because these parents were convinced that education would make a huge difference in their children's lives if they could attain education. And that's what started Frances Dixon along the road to start this program from very, very humble beginnings to 30 years later now that it is a small nonprofit with a few education literacy programs that are flourishing in the very remote western highlands of Guatemala in the province of Huehuetenango.
Yeah, I was not at all familiar with this until we got this connection going, and I started to research a little bit. And I guess just from my perspective, it is hard to believe that in 2022 that there still exists this kind of poverty and this kind of challenge in our world, that these people after the Civil War and all were really just driven from their homes. I mean, I hate to say it, but the more I think about it is, right now we look at what's going on in Ukraine, and people are just being driven from their cities and their homes out into the country or into other countries that they don't know, just in order to survive. And here is a culture of people that were so persecuted, and they fled to the highlands, and they had nothing. I mean, they had no running water, they had no electricity, they had no shelter, they had no food, and they had to try to survive on their own. And along comes this angel, Frances Dixon, who recognized this and said, I'm going to help. And she started this program. As you said, it's been 30 years already. So from nothing 30 years ago, how has the Mayan culture in that area improved over these last 3 decades?
Well, let me tell you several things on that point. Today, the literacy rate in Guatemala is around 80%, which seems relatively high, but compared to other countries, it's not that high. However, of that average, the Mayan literacy rate is only about half. And of that, the women's literacy rate is even worse. So you can see that the problem is still there, and you can see the magnitude of that challenge.
Yeah, we see this a lot in some of the third world countries in Africa, where it's always the female population that seems to be slighted and pushed to the side, and they have to fight for that education. But I mean, when Frances founded this organization and started doing this work, I mean, she started on a shoestring, and she started with nothing. And
Right.
and her persistence, how did she reach out to the people back here in the United States and all to say, I need help, and I want this help? And then my follow-up question is, how did Emily Francona get involved?
Well, Frances is, if nothing else, an extremely persistent person. When she sets her mind on something, there is nothing that can deter her. And she started this when she had a career in publishing.
Mm-hmm.
She lived in Miami, Florida. And eventually she sold her business, put most of her savings into this effort, and then eventually devoted all of her time to this effort. Now, as far as trying to fund some of this, she pretty much relied on the generosity of her friends, of fellow Rotarians in some cases, but the entire operation is still funded largely by private donors. There are no big government grants. There are no other corporate grants that we've been able to tap into, because a lot of those prefer to deal with people that are with populations that are in their community of operations.
Right.
So she persisted on doing this slowly but surely. She figured out how to go about it, and then with funds raised from many generous donors, amazing to me to this day, she was able to acquire some land in a very, very remote area, because that's the only place where it could be afforded. And we're talking so remote that sometimes, unless you have a 4-wheel drive or a goat cart, you can't even get there. Because when these Mayans were displaced from their traditional villages, and those were the lucky ones, they were displaced, they were not killed. They had to start all over, and they had to go find places where they didn't belong to anybody else, and where they could try to eke out a living with subsistence farming at best, day labor in some coffee plantation, et cetera, et cetera. And many still live at that level many of those villages are still without electricity, and certainly without water. Yes. When I visited one of the villages, one of the families came up to me and said, very proudly, "We want to show you our solar panel." And they had a solar panel that was about 2 by 2 on the roof of their hut that was open to the elements on one side. And it had 2 plug-ins dangling from it, one with a light bulb and one for a cell phone. They didn't have a cell phone, but there was a plug-in. And they were so proud of it, because some years back, someone from a Rotary Club in Canada had visited and had brought one solar panel along as a gift to the village. And that's how basic the living conditions are. And as far as water is concerned, they have no nearby wells, and they basically catch rainwater and try to filter it, or they rely on very expensive water being trucked in a water tank. So very, very basic.
Again, in my wildest imagination, it's hard to believe that there are still, communities and people that live under these conditions in this world of 2022. It's amazing. Now, is Frances still actively involved in the project?
Well, I have to tell you this. Until early this year, Frances remained the driving force behind everything. She would spend at least half her year on location and guide everything. She was the founder, operations manager, CEO, president, everything, because she is just so devoted to this. Unfortunately, early this year, Frances had some health challenges. She had to be medevaced out of Guatemala. Wow. And has been spending convalescence time in Miami where her son lives. So the rest of the organization has stepped in, especially our very, very effective vice president, to continue operations.
And then there are volunteers like yourself, and folks, it's been posted on the screen already, and I urge you, adoptavillage.com. It's a fascinating website, and I have to tell you, a beautiful website. The photos, the information, what is going on there it's really. It's not heart-wrenching, but it's also very, very uplifting to see that the fact that these people had virtually nothing, and that through the work of Frances Dixon and the volunteers and everything, they have helped these people with their housing. They have helped their people with their water systems, with their ability to raise crops to sustain themselves. It's really intriguing. And was it because of your connection through Rotary International that you got involved in this project?
Yes, Stuart, that's exactly right. Francis came to our club and said, I would like you to consider becoming a part of this effort. And our club decided, yes, we would like to take a closer look at it because our members were interested in educational literacy as a cause. So our part of the effort became, let's leave no girl behind. We focused on sponsoring girls to attend the Maya Jaguar middle and high school. So, and then I started working with Francis, and I eventually volunteered to be the project coordinator from our club with Francis. And based on that, I decided that I actually wanted to see what's happening there on the ground myself. And in 2019, I traveled there and spent 2 weeks there. So I have to explain how this effort functions. Because the area is so remote, each little village has a grade school, an elementary school. It goes 1 through 6, and that's all the government provides. There are no middle schools or high schools that are government provided, for anybody else. So Francis's dream was to give these kids an education beyond elementary school. So eventually what she did is she acquired land and built a school complex, a middle school and a high school, and the adjacent dorms and huts that were required to keep the children on location, because it was not practical to have them commute back and forth to school every day. So the way that they worked out the system is the school would go round up the students from their villages, bring them at the beginning of the month, and they would stay, learn, eat, sleep, be housed, and work their little vegetable patches at the school for the next 3 weeks. Then for the 4th week of the month, they would go back home, be taken back home, and they would convey to their younger siblings what they learned. That was the idea. Go a little beyond just them learning, but also try to sort of a force multiplier, if you will.
Oh, great idea.
So that's what started. And then she acquired an abandoned coffee plantation to try to see if they could come up with a farm where they could grow highly nutritious grains to help with the malnutrition aspect of all of these children that they would see. So those are the things that were going on, and that's what's happening now. Of course, during COVID, there was a bit of a setback. So they're just trying to gear up again. As you may imagine, unlike here in the States, online learning was not such an easy option there, where you have virtually no connectivity. They have a very expensive internet service that a provider from Mexico gives them. But when I was there, I can tell you that at best, it would work 2 or 3 hours a week, and they could have some classes with that, and then it would just collapse. So just one more challenge.
Now, in 30 years, they're probably in their second generation or almost even to the third generation of Mayans that have been involved in this whole project. And how has that progressed over the 30 years?
Well, actually, this is just a recent attempt. Before that, before they were able to acquire this property and build the school and the education complex, this is fairly recent. It's less than 10 years old. So I can tell you one success story, for instance. One of the initial graduates, who happens to be a young woman, went on to study nursing. and became a certified nurse and opted to come back to the school and become the school nurse and the biology instructor. So they're getting some of the payback from this program.
Yeah.
Another one that's a really interesting success story, and this just happened to a young woman that was graduating when I was there. Isabel graduated at the top of her class in academics and in technical skills. And I'll get to the curriculum later. And opted to, she said what she really wanted to do is become a computer scientist. And so the staff helped her find in in another province, a computer academy. That was one of those intensive learning places where you could get a certification in 1 year of intensive studies. So several of us pitched in and made that study possible for her. And now she would have been a very, very employable young lady in the area with those skills. But again, she opted to come back if the school would have her. And she is now the computer science instructor. And more importantly, she's a real role model for the rest of the students, not just the women, the men as well. I mean, the boys and the girls. And so these are very small examples of how the program is paying back, but we're so proud of those little small steps that we're doing. If I may just tell you a little bit about how the curriculum works.
Please.
Frances has very strict ideas about what academics require and so on. So she modeled the curriculum somewhat on the Montessori model, if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
But in addition to that, not only strict academic standards, but she also introduced additional things that the students had to do. One of them was learn technical skills. Always a desirable in any employee, no matter where, but certainly in that area. And then she would also teach them leadership skills,
right?
Being responsible for themselves, helping others, helping the younger ones. When they go back home to the villages, they were expected to read to the smaller children and teach them a little bit. So that in itself, and the idea that each student at that complex is entrusted with a vegetable bed that they plant, tend to, and then share the harvest with the rest of the students, because they have a joint dining hall where they all eat when they're on campus. So all of this adds skills to their otherwise limited skill set. And that they take home, how to grow vegetables and so on, a little bit of nutritional knowledge, they take that home to their parents too. So there's a lot more coming out of this than you would expect.
Well, and you personally have really had challenges from the time that you were young, and you have lived an incredible life to get to a point where you recognize how important what is going on in Guatemala is too, because you're an immigrant to the United States. And I want you to share a little of your story, because I was almost breathless just to learn about your upbringing in Romania and what you went through. So share a little of that with our listeners and watchers too.
Well, this is really why I consider education so important, because education made everything possible for me. And that and perseverance, I might add. But if I had not had an education and continued to pursue being educated, I could not have become an Air Force officer and a reasonably successful one at that, and done a lot of the things in life that I have done. It's all down to education and perseverance. And I see that in those kids. And when I was visiting there in 2019, I was so impressed by how enthused they were about learning. They wanted to learn. They were excited to learn. And yet, given the hardship of their lives there, I never saw anybody sad or upset. They were always cheerful, happy with their lot, pleased that they had what they had, and no sulking, no whining, none of that. They were just happy to get what they could get, and eager to learn. And that was so impressive for me.
How much of what they have gone through was kind of mirrored by you and what you went through as a child?
Well, as you might imagine, growing up under communism, and very strict and nasty communism at that, given, if you know anything about the history of Nicolae Ceausescu in Romania, he was not a good guy. So being ethnic German in Romania added that extra layer of persecuted ethnicity. We were called Transylvanian Saxon. Most people have never heard of that, but it is an ethnic group that immigrated to that area, the western part of Romania, which is Transylvania. They immigrated there in the 1300s, and have been an ethnic minority there ever since. There are very few left now because they've all tried to repatriate back to Austria and mostly Germany, a lot of them to the US. So there are very few left, but some of us still speak the old dialect, and I speak it to my mother, but it's dying out. And it's so feeling as a persecuted minority is not alien to watching the Maya, how they are persecuted there, because they're just not regarded as full citizens, if you will, of Guatemala.
And what was your path to the United States?
Well, my family tried to immigrate for 10 years. We were always denied. And then at one point, my parents just went to Austria and never came back. And after a few years of further persecution, we were bought out by Germany. They used to ransom out ethnic Germans at the time. Hard currency was very sought after by the Ceausescu regime, and Western Germany at the time was willing to pay for ethnic Germans for them to be allowed to immigrate. And then I decided that Germany was turning a little bit too socialist for me, so I set my sights on the land of opportunity, and this is where I came, and this is where I had my opportunities, just as I expected, and just as I tried to make happen for myself.
And part of that journey was in the U.S. military.
Right.
It's a fascinating story, and some of the things. Please share that with some of the things that you did through the U.S. military. You were with the Air Force, am I correct?
Right. Well, as I was going through college, I became aware of the ROTC program, and I was very interested in giving back to my adopted country in some form or another. So I explored various options, and it seemed the military was a good way to do that. And so I looked into the Air Force ROTC program at my university, University of Central Florida. And lo and behold, I was accepted. I had just become a citizen, so I was just squeaking in there. And then I decided, well, I have a bit of a knowledge of Europe and other, and let's say, regimes and history and some languages. So I thought, well, I really might be useful in the intelligence field. But none of the intelligence organizations at the time were interested in anybody like me. So I thought, well, let me just try the military. And I talked to the Air Force. And then I kind of tried to talk someone into considering me for intelligence. Now, as you may imagine, someone coming from a communist country, Clearances, as you may imagine, might be a little hard to get to, and so it took me quite a while, but I persevered and I kept pushing my case, saying I really have something to offer, and I really think you should take advantage of me. And lo and behold, eventually I was admitted into the Air Force Intelligence Program, and went to my first assignment was at the Air Force Intelligence School, then in Denver, Colorado, where I happened to meet my husband, who happened to be there as well. And the rest is history.
You know, so long before you even met Francis Dixon, there was a lot of Francis Dixon in Emily Francona.
Well, maybe that's why we got along kind of well.
Yeah, just that element of perseverance that you knew you had something to offer, and you weren't going to let any barriers stand in your way. And to come from a childhood and a background that you had, and now be serving in the intelligence part of our U.S. military, and even after that, you continued service in the government.
Right.
After military service, what were some of the things that you did within government service?
Well, when I retired from the Air Force, I had planned to become a certified financial planner, believe it or not. But I was called by the staff director of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who said, I heard you're retiring. I think we would like to interview you for a position with us. We are looking for people with your kind of background. And I thought, well, it wasn't really on my radar. So I went for a couple of interviews, and long story short, they were able to convince me that I might enjoy that work. So I did that for the next 5 years, and actually thoroughly enjoyed it, because the difference between serving in the executive branch, i.e. in the military, to serving in the legislative branch, i.e. the Senate Intelligence Committee, was quite different. Again, one hell of a learning experience for me. And I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad they persisted in talking me into doing that. And I'm just richer for the experience.
Well, you also had a husband that really was on kind of a parallel path, because he was working in the military and working in similar roles. So you were able to really, kind of support each other in that ever, because he worked. We're going to get him on the show too, because Rick has got a great background too in the military. So you have a family. You raise a family. You're in Oregon now,
right?
When after the military and after serving in the U.S. government and all, is that when you said, okay, it's time to retire? And
yes, we did.
To use the word loosely, relax.
Yeah. I like to call it moving on to other interests.
Yes.
But here's the thing. When Rick and I were together, we did not always have the luxury of joint assignments. As a matter of fact, we were, by hook or by crook, we managed to have about half of our assignments together. But it almost invariably meant taking, let's just say, not the best assignments to be able to be together, and then take better assignments, more interesting assignments, and not be together. So it was a back and forth, constantly juggling that. And no, we did not raise a family. We were a professional couple, and then remained that way to this day.
And so now I mentioned at the beginning of the show that our mutual friend Bill Greil, who is very, very much involved in Rotary, is that how you got involved as a Rotarian?
Yes. And like I said, my club at the time became involved with this project and carried it out for a few years. But by this time, I was so interested in what Francis was doing there that I just simply continued my work, my volunteer work, directly with the organization. And that's what I devote my full time to right now, my full volunteering time, if you will. And I'm helpful with what I do is I help with fundraising. Although I'm not a good fundraiser, I don't have any background in fundraising, but I so believe in what the programs are doing and the impact they're having that I just knuckle down and do it anyway. And one of the things I'm doing is I give presentations to Rotary clubs or any other organization that's interested in hearing about these programs and that is perhaps willing to consider a partnership with us and in helping to raise funds and fund some of these programs.
Well, and that's an avenue for those of you that are watching and listening the program too. Go to the website, and if you feel that there is an opportunity for you or your local Rotary Club or so to be of assistance in Emily's efforts to move the Adopt a Village in Guatemala forward, reach out to Emily. Maybe she can address your Rotary Club, or she can address whatever civic organization you have to say, hey, this sounds like something that maybe our group would like to adopt and assist in any way that we possibly can. It's a great organization, and I know that Bill is tenacious about getting people to be involved and to help raise funds for various things. So I can understand where he would be behind you 100% too.
He is. He's been an encouragement from the very beginning, and a great supporter.
Yeah, and so this program that you have been involved with, a program that's been going for 30 years. Where do you see it, maybe 5 years from now or 10 years from now, the way it's developed from virtually nothing to having homes, having opportunities to raise crops, to educate the children who are going on and getting degrees and coming back to help? Where do you see this Adopt a Village in Guatemala moving forward?
Well, before I tell you that vision, if you would allow me to just describe our newest program, which we're very excited about.
This is your forum too, dear.
Thank you. One of the things that Francis Dixon and the teaching staff there discovered is that when they were looking for students to accept into the middle school that had graduated from 6th grade, they found that these students were not competent at the level they were expected to be competent. So now here's the problem. These children, they're Maya. Their parents, by and large, are illiterate. They speak no Spanish at home. They only speak a Maya dialect. Okay. The Mayan dialects in the area, there are about 3 in the immediate area. One is Canjobal, one is Mam, and one is Chush. And most of them are not mutually intelligible either because of, remember, they were displaced from all those different places.
Right.
So now we have villages speaking one, villages speaking another. But these kids go to 1st grade, they don't speak Spanish. The government curriculum at a government school is Spanish. It's the official language. So they're already way behind power curve. And they struggle and struggle because the school will not give remedial Spanish teachings. And so they struggle and struggle. Many drop out in frustrations. And those who do graduate from 6th grade are only marginal fluent and competent in Spanish. So then if they attempt to go to a middle school and then on to a high school, they're already way behind. So Francis and the staff discovered this, so they started a new program. It's been going on for 2 years now, where they're giving these preschoolers a leg up on trying to prepare them to go into 1st grade. It's called the Early Learning Bilingual Program. Bilingual because they're Maya speaking, but they have to get up to speed in Spanish, or they're not. They're going to be left behind, and they're just going to continue to struggle and get nowhere fast. So right now we have 3 villages where the parents have come and said, yes, we would like this program. Please help us. It might be 15 kids. It might be 30 kids. It just depends. So we're slowly trying to expand this program because more and more parents are coming to ask for it. Of course, like everything else, it costs money. So most of our fundraising effort right now is trying to expand that program and give these preschoolers a chance to succeed, at least in elementary school, let alone beyond. So this is another one of those things that Francis is just pushing, and we're trying very hard to make that happen. Obviously, on a very, very small scale, 1 child at a time. And so to those organizations out there, Rotary clubs or other civic organizations that may be interested in this, I'd like to remind you that Rotary International has several areas of focus. Education and literacy is one of them. And so I would encourage them to consider a partnership with us in a small or a big way, whatever works.
Yeah, my dad was a Rotarian, and I remember that the motto of Rotary is service above self.
Exactly.
And it continues that way. And for those that are watching and listening, again, I urge you to visit the website. If you want to donate something monetarily to just help with the mission of this organization, please do so. But hey, if you're bilingual and you're saying, you know what, maybe I can help by going down to Guatemala and helping a little bit down there. As you said, Francis isn't up to being there as often as she wants to be. So you need volunteers. You need, boots on the ground, as they say in the military.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's imperative. We can't do it alone. And it's just the generosity of other people and our donors that were hanging in there.
Yeah. When is your next trip down to Guatemala?
I haven't planned one yet. I keep debating, can I be of more use here, helping to raise funds and give my funds to the organization, or spend them on going back down there? So I'm not quite determined on that yet. But you mentioned something else earlier about service above self. Rotarians know this. Service above self is the leitmotif, if you will, of Rotary. It's what makes everything happen in Rotary. And therefore, the highest award and recognition that Rotary International has is the Service Above Self Award. And Frances Dixon was given this award in 2020 to recognize her 30 years of dedication. And oh, by the way, our current acting president, Ted Rose, who lives in Mexico, by the way, is also a recipient of that same award for his dedication to service. So we're very, very proud to have these people as part of our volunteer cadre, so to speak. We have no paid staff. We only have volunteers. And you asked me earlier about the vision. One of the visions I have personally is that we can offer these kids enough opportunities in their own country through education to make them gainful employees and contributing citizens, that they will not feel the need to jump on that dangerous migration trek through Mexico and onto our border, that they have enough opportunities in their own country to be able to be good citizens and happy and have a productive life. That's one of my visions.
Well, I certainly can see that through the work of Frances Dixon and Emily Francona and Bill Greil and Rotary International, you bring all of those things together and everything, and they will help make it happen for the indigenous people of Guatemala. It's wonderful. Emily, thank you very, very much for spending time with me today and sharing your story, sharing the story of Adopt a Village in Guatemala. And as a veteran today, today is Pearl Harbor Day, so we want you to remember that day, a day that will live in infamy. But it also kind of gives you that extra feeling that yes, if we work together, we can make things happen. And you have helped make things happen. Your husband has, Bill has, and God bless Frances Dixon. I hope she is feeling well as we head into the holidays, and I wish the very, very best to you also.
Thank you, Stuart. It was a pleasure to be with you. And as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this topic.
Absolutely.
I love talking about it. I give presentations. Anybody who's interested at all, I'd love to chat to them about it. And I so appreciate this opportunity to spread the word. Thank you.
My pleasure. I end my show by saying, be yourself because everyone else is already taken. And
so true.
And it's very, very true in this instance. And also the very happy holidays to you and to your family, and all to Frances Dixon and to Adopt a Village in Guatemala. Please join us again next week for another edition of Someone You Should Know, and go out and make it a good day. Thanks again, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine.
Someone You Should Know.